Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. The reaction to Donald Trump's conviction has been swift, loud, and diverse. So what does it mean for the U.S. election? In half an hour, we'll take you live to Vancouver police. They'll speak about a fire outside a synagogue in Vancouver last night, which they are investigating as a possible hate crime. We'll hear what they have to say. After 12:30, our series Road to Recovery has raised gaps in supports. We'll speak with the Minister for Mental Health and Addictions. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and you can catch us on the CBC News app. You can call us now on our top story. Does former U.S. President Donald Trump's conviction help or hinder his chances in the November U.S. election? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your phone or email bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, it is the day after Donald Trump was found guilty on all 34 felony counts. Today, the former U.S. president railed against the verdict at a news conference. The presumptive Republican presidential nominee doubled down on many of his previous claims and called the New York jury's verdict unfair.
It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously, he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
That was Donald Trump speaking this morning. U.S. President Joe Biden also spoke today.
The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens, 12 Americans, 12 people like you, like millions of Americans who served on juries. This jury is chosen the same way every jury in America is chosen.
Now, public reaction is mixed. Detractors and supporters alike are making their voices heard.
Go to jail! Go to jail! Go to jail! Trump is guilty! Trump is guilty! I've been here for the last week. Guilty! I'm so happy.
We're angry, but we're also happy in a way. Because you know what? My president's got street credit now. Now he's really got street credit. He's been convicted of 34 counts. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there in the streets that were convicted too. So now you can relate to President Trump.
Some of the public opinion on the streets of New York and from a rally outside Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. What do you think? Will these guilty verdicts hurt or hinder Trump's chances in November's presidential election? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your phone or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now to take your calls is Chris Galdieri, professor of political science at St. Anselm College in Concord, New Hampshire. Good afternoon, Professor. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Happy to be here.
What do you make of the reaction to yesterday's verdict?
Well, I mean, so far the reactions we've heard are breakdown as you'd expect. Trump supporters are trying to spin this into a win of some sort, trying to discredit not just the trial in particular, but the justice system as a whole. And then you're seeing from Democrats, as we heard President Biden saying stuff like respect the process, respect the justice system. But I think as the campaign heats up, you'll see an effort to use the words convicted felon in conjunction with Donald Trump's name pretty much every hour on the hour between now and the end of Election Day in November.
And as you heard, someone well, that just means he's relatable. I mean, what does that mean for public opinion, really?
Well, I think, one thing that's really useful is to think about the public in terms of segments and their pre-existing alliances and allegiances. I mean, I think there are very few Biden supporters who are going to hear this news and decide, oh, wow, now I want to vote for Donald Trump. And I think a lot of Trump supporters have a vested interest in trying to dismiss and discredit this outcome. But I think, you've still got small slices of the electorate where this could really have a big impact on how they think. If we look at the Republican primaries this year, there's still a sizable number of people who are turning out to vote for Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, in primary after primary, even though she ended her campaign back in March. Since the Trump era began in 2016, we've seen a lot of movement away from Republicans amongst well-off, college-educated suburbanites, suburban women in particular. I don't know that those voters are going to be brought back into the Republican fold because Trump has been convicted of 34 crimes. So I think, the way to think about this is not, is there going to be a collapse in Trump's support, but are there going to be, small but meaningful slices of the electorate where this becomes one more hurdle they'd have to jump over before they were willing to vote for Trump again?
And those small slices could make all the difference, right?
That's correct, especially given the electoral college system that the U.S. uses to elect its presidents. It does not take that, you could imagine a swing state like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan. If 2024 is anything like 2020, and every indication is that it will be, the election is going to come down to possibly just tens of thousands of votes in those key swing states. And so movement or amongst small chunks of the electorate could be very meaningful when they're all added up.
Okay, we are taking your calls as well on this. An historic day in the United States yesterday. Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 felony counts. The first time a former U.S. president has been found guilty. And we're asking you, what do you think will be the impact on the upcoming U.S. election in November? Do you think this will hurt, hinder, or will it help him? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 or email bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guest here is Chris Caldieri, professor of political science at St. Anselm College in Concord, New Hampshire. Perhaps you can explain for our Canadian audience what the rules are and why it is that sentencing will take place in early July, just a few days before the Republican convention, and he could still very well be the candidate and run for president. Perhaps you can just let us know, why that is.
Sure. What it really comes down to is that the American Constitution spells out a handful of requirements that someone has to make in order to be eligible to serve as president. They have to be a citizen of the United States who was born in the United States or born overseas to American citizens. They have to be over 35 years of age. They have to have resided in the country for a certain number of years, and they cannot have served 2 terms as president previously. That's it. There's nothing in there saying that you can't run for president or serve as president if you've been convicted of a felony. And so, in the past, we've seen minor candidates. Eugene V. Debs was the socialist candidate for president in 1920. He ran for president from his prison cell. He had been convicted of violating the Espionage Act in, I think, 1917, protesting American involvement in World War I. He didn't win the election, but there was nothing that kept him from being a candidate, from writing letters and that sort of thing from his prison cell. The same rules apply to a Donald Trump candidacy in 2024. Even if the judge orders him immediately to be sent to prison while his appeal is underway, or sentences him to some form of home confinement, he is still eligible to run for president. And I think it's quite likely that we could have some sort of situation where he is running this summer and attending the Republican convention and going to rallies while wearing an ankle bracelet to track his movements, and while reporting to a probation officer in New York to let him know that, oh, I'm leaving the state, I'm going to Arizona to hold a rally, I'm going to Michigan to have a fundraiser. that sort of thing. We're really in uncharted campaign waters in that respect.
Yeah, very true. My guest here is a professor of political science in Concord, New Hampshire at St. Anselm College. Chris Galdieri is joining us. Thanks so much for being here. And we're asking for our audience to weigh in. This is the question now. What does this verdict mean? What impact could it have on the November election? Do you think it will hinder Donald Trump's chances or help his chances? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Scott is joining us from Victoria. Hi, Scott. What are your thoughts?
Well, Trump, the hardcore base. Swing.
A hardcore base, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the swing being a convicted felon now, I think is 7 to 10%, meaning he is going to lose 7 to 10%. Now, would the race be tight enough that will swing it? Probably. I mean, what's really shocking is the United States, with all its might and still the biggest economy on the planet, can't come up with two better candidates. I mean, Trump clearly got a lot of issues from day one, and poor Joe there, I mean, he's well past his due date. So I can't believe that either party cannot come up with a better candidate. But in the end, I think that Biden would win again because this will hurt Trump, like I say, by 7 to 10% of his, not his hardcore base, obviously, but people that were on the fence. They just won't be able to stomach it. The swing, exactly. Yeah. But come up with some better candidates, I say.
Scott, thank you very much for your call from Victoria. We've heard this many times, right? These are the choices that the American voters have. Why have there not? I mean, we know. You mentioned Nikki Haley earlier, but why do you think these are the choices come November?
Well, in the case of the Democrats, it's just a norm of American politics that a president running for his party's nomination for the second time almost invariably wins it. The only times that hasn't been the case involved, Lyndon Johnson facing a strong challenge at the height of the Vietnam War, Harry Truman, who had already served almost 2 full terms, opting not to run for a third. But for the most part, if you are the president and you are able to run for a second term, your party puts you up again. We know that there were no, well-known Democrats who were willing to challenge Biden in the primaries. You had a little-known congressman from Minnesota enter the race, and he basically got clobbered from the first primary until he dropped out. With the Republicans, it's a little more complicated. Donald Trump has, first of all, managed to establish himself as the standard for what being a good Republican is, which is to say you're a good Republican to the extent that you agree with and support Donald Trump. And so that's made it really hard for other folks in the party to challenge him. We saw this spectacle all through last summer. Every time Trump got indicted, his rivals, instead of attacking him over it, for the Republican nomination, would say, well, he shouldn't be indicted. And if I win the nomination and win the election, the first thing I'll do is pardon him. So you've seen this sort of surrender from Republican leaders to Donald Trump over the last 8 years. Back in 2016, there were a lot of folks who said they were against Trump, who were trying to prevent him from being nominated even after the primaries ended. Those folks aren't around anymore. They've either left the party or they've left electoral politics and gone on to do something else. And so in the face of that, in the absence of party leaders being willing to criticize Trump, he's going to remain the leader of the Republican Party until the rest of the party says no.
Well, you even have, his competitor, Nikki Haley, then turn around and just getting on that same train.
Exactly. And, that race, it was not like the standard party presidential primary where you see where, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama disagreed about that and argued about that. But at the end of the day, they're basically on the same page. Or we saw this with, Mitt Romney endorsing John McCain in 2008, John McCain endorsing George W. Bush in 2000. That was not the case this year. Haley was saying some really strong criticisms of Trump, talking about him as unhinged and unfit and somebody who shouldn't be president and that sort of thing. That's not the normal primary campaign rhetoric. But when push came to shove, eventually she came around and said she was going to vote for Trump.
Let's take some more calls. Matthew in Langley. Hi there. What are your thoughts on what this verdict means for the election?
Yeah, I don't think Trump is going to be too affected by this conviction here. I think it is going to hurt him. It could hurt him possibly seeing which way Nikki Haley voters decide to go. This could push them over the edge to vote for Biden, but it could also just do nothing. They could be like, all right, I'm not going to vote either way now.
Are you watching the road to the election closely, Matthew, from Langley?
Yeah, I was born in the States, so I do still consider myself an American citizen, even though I carry just the Canadian citizenship now. But yeah, I'm watching it closely. It's very interesting to watch.
Interesting to watch. Thank you so much for calling in. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
That's Matthew in Langley, and Donald is up next in Vancouver now. Hi, Donald.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What are your thoughts? Yeah, what do you think this will mean for November?
I just want to say I'm somebody who's certainly not been a fan of Donald Trump in any way. Sorry, I'm just in a busy area here. Definitely not a Donald Trump fan, but I think it's pretty hard to ignore the obvious, injustice that's going on here. I think that those that think that there's anything positive about this and people who are cheering this on, who are giddy about this, are extremely short-sighted. I think there are any number of politicians who have been guilty of misappropriating much more than $150,000.
Certainly an argument he made this morning,
by Trump, even current politicians, if you really want to dig through things and, the fact that they're attacking them about this and they think this is some sort of a victory from the supposed left. It wasn't that long ago that the left were the ones who were the defenders of free speech, who were the defenders of equality, real equality. I think things have just flipped on their head recently. And I think there are a lot of people, everyone I talk to realizes the obvious insanity of this.
Well, insanity of what, Donald?
Well, of convicting him for a extremely minor offense that countless politicians are guilty of.
Okay, but he did have due process, right?
$150,000 misappropriation of campaign funds. If you look into any of the current, even liberal, NDP, conservative politicians that we have here, it's crazy. None of them are facing jail time. None of them are facing these kinds of charges and being dragged through the media.
Sure.
So there's nothing objective about it.
Okay.
Clearly, right? I mean, it's
Donald,
to me,
it's an argument we've heard for sure. Thank you very much for the call. And none of those politicians went through, were indicted and put through the court process. But it's an argument Donald Trump himself made this morning and yesterday as well, saying that this is. Many other politicians have done the same. I'm paraphrasing there, but what do you think of what he's saying there? That this case, essentially, as he's saying, is my take on it is that it's political, and that any other politician, who might have done something similar, has not faced the same kind of conviction.
Well, I think it's worth noting that we've had a lot of politicians in the U.S. who have been indicted and found guilty of various crimes, financial, campaign finance related or otherwise. Robert Menendez, a Democratic senator from New Jersey, is about to stand trial over charges of accepting bribes, some of which were actually in the form of gold bars, which I think is just charmingly old school. You had Rod Blagojevich, the governor of Illinois, went to prison for trying to sell essentially Barack Obama's Senate seat after Obama was elected president. There's a long list of politicians at all levels of government who have been accused of wrongdoing, indicted, tried and convicted by a jury of their peers. Some of them go to prison. Some of them have been sentenced to fines, and that sort of thing. I think just what makes this different is that people aren't used to this in the context of a former president. But other countries have done this sort of thing, and the long-term effect is simply to show that, look, it doesn't matter who you are. If you break the law, you can face consequences for it. And I don't think that's a terrible thing to have in a democracy.
Does it tell you that, when that message is out there that nobody else has faced, a similar persecution, prosecution was one of the posters I saw yesterday. Does that tell you about how effective Trump has been at just, repeating and saying the same thing and making the same claims to really bake those into his supporters' minds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of Trump's strengths as a communicator is that he generally keeps his messages short and simple and to the point. Think about 2016, his campaign could be summed up in about 10 words: make America great again, build the wall, lock her up. And he repeated those every time he was in front of a camera. What's interesting about his reaction to the trial and then the verdict yesterday is that, he has been saying the same things over and over again about them, but he's been saying them largely to a smaller audience. He's no longer in the White House. He's no longer on Twitter. So you really have to be a dedicated Trump supporter to have followed all of the ins and outs of the things he was saying about the judge and the campaign and the trial yesterday and today.
I really appreciate your joining us, and perhaps we will talk again before November. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Chris Galdieri is a political science professor at St. Anselm College in Concord, New Hampshire. 12:27 now, Pacific time. This is BC Today. And the CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. He brings us more details on how Donald Trump is responding to yesterday's guilty verdict.
We heard the former president cranking out his greatest hits. He attacked the judge, he attacked the case, he attacked his former fixer, who was a star witness, Michael Cohen, and he insists he did absolutely nothing wrong. He mocked the term hush money, saying it was perfectly legal. NDAs are legal. And he did say he's going to appeal this ruling, but ultimately he will soon have the label convicted felon behind his name after he's sentenced. So clearly, that's nothing anyone would be happy about. But at the same time, you heard his loyal supporters in the background clapping when he talked about how much money he raised as a fundraising plea shortly after that guilty verdict came down. So as we've been saying all morning, this conviction really fits into Trump's campaign strategy of grievance and revenge throughout this. And even in his last press conference, he painted himself a victim as a rigged electoral system and now an unfair justice system. And he's been helped by conservative media here in the U.S. who've helped his cause, cranking up the outrage and really linking this to the Biden White House, accusing the White House of weaponizing the Department of Justice. And we've also seen some loyal Republicans rallying to Trump's defense, including his potential vice presidential pick, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and Texas Senator John Cornyn, who's eyeing a leadership role in the Senate and could use Trump's endorsement.
That's CBC's Richard Madden reporting from Washington. And much more on this story throughout the day. For updates, you can go anytime to the CBC News app. Just download it on iOS and Android. And coming up in just moments from now, the Vancouver Police Department are scheduled to speak to reporters. They are investigating a fire outside a synagogue last night, the Shaarei Tzedek Synagogue on Oak Street. They're investigating it as an arson, and we'll take you there live.
Good afternoon. The Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver is condemning the arson attack at a local synagogue. It says an incendiary device was thrown at the front doors of the Shaarei Tzedek Synagogue last night. Members of the congregation were able to put out the flames before they spread, and no one was hurt. Rabbi Andrew Rosenblatt says the attack is part of an unsettling pattern spurred by hateful rhetoric. And we now join the Vancouver Police News Conference with more information on that arson. And here's Constable Tanya Byzantine.
Investigation into a sex assault on a teenage girl. We'll take questions after that, and then I will discuss the incident at the synagogue after that and take questions on that. So Metro Vancouver Transit Police launched an investigation 2 weeks ago after a 15-year-old girl was groped at a bus stop at Quebec, near Broadway and Quebec, on May 17th at 2:45 in the afternoon. Investigators from VPD's Sex Crimes Unit worked together with transit police since the investigation was launched to identify and arrest a suspect. That suspect, Brendan Jonathan Yates, a 25-year-old man, was arrested.
This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. You're listening to Constable Tanya Vizentine with the Vancouver Police Department right now. She is speaking on a different case at the moment, but as you heard, she will be getting to that investigation into a fire outside a synagogue in Vancouver last night. Now, police and fire services responded at around 10 p.m. To a fire near the entrance of the Shara Tzedek Synagogue on Oak Street. The fire did not cause injuries or significant property damage. Police are investigating it as an arson and a possible hate crime. And we have seen a lot of reaction to this throughout the morning leading up to this press conference by Vancouver Police. There was a statement released from B'nai B'rith Canada, and this is from B'nai B'rith Canada's British Columbia Regional Manager, Aaron Saplaros, who said, "I was horrified to receive a frantic call from a community member that there was a fire burning at the entrance to the building." Now, the statement goes on to say, this is a serious and dangerous escalation of anti-Semitic activity in Vancouver. It is outrageous and repugnant. And the statement says the latest incident of targeting of Jewish institutions across Canada comes just days after Jewish schools in both Montreal and Toronto were targeted with gunfire, and a month after Charlotte Cates, the Vancouver-based international coordinator of Samadoun, was arrested for hate speech-related charges after glorifying the October 7th massacre in front of a large crowd in the city. So that statement coming from B'nai B'rith Canada. Premier David Eby issued a statement this morning. "We stand with the Jewish community in BC and unequivocally condemn anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred." And he goes on to say, "I'm relieved no one was hurt. I know police will thoroughly investigate to bring justice for Congregation Shara Tzedek and British Columbians." Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also posted this morning, "We cannot let this hate or these acts of violence stand. This is not the Canada we want to be." So some of the reaction to a fire outside a synagogue on Oak Street in Vancouver that's happened last night. Vancouver police investigating it as arson and as a possible hate crime. And they are scheduled to speak about it right now. In fact, they're going through other cases that they are investigating, but will speak to this fire incident and will take questions from reporters as well. Let's go back live now to Vancouver Police.
What we do get in a year is approximately 150 to 200 incidents of that. During the pandemic, we did see a significant drop. We have returned to pre-pandemic levels. However, it's one of those instances where one is too much. But if you want specific numbers, please feel free to reach out, and we'll just get you the specific numbers if you want.
And do you have investigators dedicated to hate crimes at all?
We do have a general investigative unit, and they are in liaison with the hate crime. So if they do encounter a situation where they believe a hate crime has occurred, they will flag it, and they will actually consult with the hate crime unit as well.
Which unit? The BC hate crimes team?
That one. The EDIV, yes. Yeah. They are in constant communication whenever an incident like that happens. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Peter.
And Constable Tanya Vizentine is taking to the podium now.
So moving on to our second investigation. Last night at around 10 p.m., Vancouver Police and Vancouver Fire Services responded to a fire near the entrance of a Jewish synagogue, which is located at Oak Street and West 18th Avenue. Investigators believe an accelerant was used to light fire to the front of that building. The fire, we believe, was intentionally set at this place of worship, and it is being investigated as a possible hate crime. While we collect evidence to determine the identity of the person responsible, we're also working closely with faith leaders and community members to ensure everyone's safety. Thankfully, the fire didn't cause significant property damage or injuries, and it was put out by members of the synagogue before it could spread. We are doing everything in our power to solve this crime while providing reassurance, comfort, and safety to the community. We will continue to have a higher police presence in strategic locations throughout the coming days as this investigation unfolds. So we will have additional officers positioned at various locations in the city, which includes Jewish synagogues, Jewish community centers, religious schools, and other public schools in the area. Our major crime section is taking the lead into this investigation, but we also have our officers from our diversity, community, and Indigenous relations sections who are also conducting extensive community outreach. Anyone with information, specifically anyone who has footage on their or attached to their homes or their cars, dash cam footage, in the area of West 18th and Oak, is asked to call our major crime section, 604-717-2541. Are there any questions?
Since October 7th, how many incidents have occurred here in the city of Vancouver or targeted attacks?
On the Jewish community. You know what, I don't have those numbers in front of me. Our latest numbers we put out in February, I believe it was, or end of January. I do know for this year, between January and April, which are the numbers of this year alone, there have been 9 incidents. And I believe that's up from 7 in the same time period as last year. But to add on to what the stats we already gave, I can look into those further for you.
And in light of what's happened in Montreal and in Toronto in recent days with the shootings of schools and other places of worship, is there a heightened focus here in Vancouver since those attacks to be out and avoid this from happening at a synagogue like we saw last night and other incidents?
For members of the Jewish community who have been targeted and for the families of that community, this is obviously very concerning. If you are Catholic, if you are Christian, if you are Jewish, if you're a Muslim, if you went to a place of your worship and this happened to you, this would be very concerning for you and your family. So that's why, starting from last night, we've increased our patrols and we will continue to increase the patrols throughout the weekend. We have our forensic identification unit out collecting evidence. We have patrol officers canvassing the neighborhood. Our detectives from a major crime section are continuing to investigate it. So we are taking this very seriously. This is obviously a very concerning situation for the members of that community.
The members of...
I'm going to go with Paul. Sorry, he just had his hand up. Yeah.
It's a crime to commit an arson, intentionally set something on fire. There were people in the synagogue just prior to this. This wasn't in the middle of the night. If it's possible that this was done, try to set it on fire when people are there. Is that an additional and more serious crime to commit an arson with the intention of harming the people who might be in that structure? Is that anything? Is that part of your investigation?
Yeah, that's very serious. There's still a lot we don't know. We are investigating it as a possible hate crime, but there's still more to this investigation that needs to be done to really determine what caused this person to do this act. And that is why we're pouring every resource that we have today and throughout the weekend to solve this crime and find this person and hold this person accountable. So we do need the public's help. Anyone who lives in that area, it is a residential area. If your car is equipped with dash cam footage or you have home security footage, please contact our investigators.
That is Vancouver Police Constable Tanya Byzantine speaking about a fire they're investigating as an arson outside a synagogue last night. This is the Shara Tzedek Synagogue on Oak Street at West 18th Avenue. Investigators believe an accelerant was used to light a fire at the front of the building, and they believe that the fire was intentionally set. They are investigating it as a possible hate crime. Anyone with information or footage from a home or a vehicle is asked to contact VPD's Major Crime Section, 604-717-2541. Much more on this story throughout the day here on CBC. To our ongoing coverage now of BC's toxic drug crisis. Now, on the show, we have been delving into the issues of substance use and addiction in our series, Road to Recovery. And we've heard your stories about what the challenges are when you take that first step to try to recover and what families need to support a loved one. There have been many questions raised, and this morning I spoke with Jennifer Whiteside, BC's Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
The focus of our series is the road to recovery, and we've heard about many gaps along the way. How do you think BC is doing when it comes to providing recovery services?
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle, and really thank you for embarking on this conversation with British Columbians. I think it's a really important discussion to be having, and I've really appreciated hearing the messages and the stories that people have shared with you as they've called in over the course of your series. Those gaps that you spoke to, that is precisely why our government established a Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction, so that we could really focus energy across government and resources across government on building a system of care and building better access for British Columbians to get the help that they need with mental health and with substance use disorder issues, and those really focus on where those two conditions sometimes overlap. So there's no question that there's it is a work in progress. There's much more to do, but I think we've seen some really substantial change in terms of how we think about issues related to addiction, how we are working to integrate care in our health system, how we really see now addiction as a healthcare issue and an issue that requires a healthcare response.
I know that you have announced a number of treatment beds to be added, but what seems to be happening is getting to those beds, right? Getting to the services seems to be daunting. We spoke about first steps as we started this issue and this series, and we spoke with Chapman Shaw, who lives in Prince Rupert. He has worked in trades and had an experience with addiction. He's now a board member with Trinity Men's Recovery House in Prince Rupert, and I just want you to hear some of what he had to say about that moment when someone decides to get help and what's needed.
When I went to get help, Friendship House, the next day I was on the Greyhound to Kelowna Crossroads Treatment Center, which is a significant 24-hour bus ride. Now we have Trinity House here in Prince Rupert, where men have the ability to rejuvenate their lives in the community.
So timeliness.
Timely help, getting to someone that could get you to a place as soon as possible, because that window closes quickly.
That window closes quickly. Why does it still seem to be a common experience, that people will try to get help, call a facility or call a health authority to be told that there is a months-long wait?
Yeah, Michelle, and this is where addiction-related conditions are very different than hips and knees or cataract surgery or any of the other kinds of chronic
they need
diseases
immediate
also
help
that we treat, right? But people may also, that window, people might decide that they're ready to go, and they might walk to the front door. They might not even be able to knock on the door for help at that point. And then it might take them some time to come back and actually knock on the door. And then it might take them some time to go through. And I think you heard from Guy Felicella earlier in your series about the number of times that it took to actually get through that process. So designing a system where we make sure that we're catching people in that moment is tricky when we have a very fragmented system, and that's what we're working to do, is to really defragment the system that we inherited in 2017, where we had lots of supportive recovery operators and some really terrific, not-for-profits in particular who work in this sector, and but not really integrated or connected to the work that our health authorities are doing. So we've invested in really bolstering the resources through the health authorities, through the mental health and substance use divisions, and work to deepen the relationships with the supportive recovery sector so that we have more seamless communication and more seamless approaches, and so that we can work together in making sure that we have like a sort of a central access point for people to get them to be able to access those bed-based services. So, for example, on Vancouver Island, the health authority on Vancouver Island has contracted directly with Cedars, purchased beds directly with Cedars, so that when people are coming through the health authority system, they can get access right into a bed that the health authority has some direct kind of management of. We opened 180 beds just this year through with the help of the Canadian Mental Health Association BC, who's been such an important partner in this to help us bridge that gap between where people are sort of showing up in the system needing help and getting them through to beds that are free, that there's no barrier, they can self-refer to those beds. So that's the system that we're working on continuing to work to build up for in terms of access.
As you announce these beds, though, what is it at that first point of contact? Why are people still being turned away? As you say, you inherited the fragmented system in 2017, but it's been 7 years since then.
Yeah, I know, Michelle. 7 years, and including a global pandemic in that time, which, as you know, had a really important and vast impact on our healthcare system. In 2019, after 2 years of really concentrated work in the ministry, we did actually see access improve. We saw toxic drug deaths start to really decline, and when the COVID pandemic hit, that really set us back in a substantial way, particularly in this sector, because we also saw a lot of increased sort of mental health and anxiety related issues really intensify during the COVID pandemic. So not only are we working to build up from a deficit that we had coming into 2017, but also just to kind of regroup from the pandemic.
I don't know that people accept that now, though. It's been years since the pandemic started anyway, and we hear that all the time, that it was a setback in 2020, but again, the numbers of people dying continues.
Well, the numbers of people dying, I mean, Michelle, what people are really dying from in the toxic drug crisis is a poisoned illicit drug supply. That's why people are dying. They're dying because the concentrations of fentanyl and contaminants in the illicit supply are absolutely off the charts. I think the toxic drug supply has never been more dangerous than it is right now, and that's why we have to work across the whole continuum. I mean, we have to have programs in place that provide some protection for people, so we can keep them alive, so that we can connect them to the care that they need.
And when it comes to that, that continuum of care, one thing that you have been facing divided and strong opinions about is involuntary treatment. We hear from advocates who worry what it means for personal rights. The Pivot Legal Society calling for its elimination altogether. We've heard, though, from some parents who say that's what would help their child, is to be able to compel them into treatment. I just want you to hear from Luana, who called us on the open line from Victoria.
Unfortunately, for my daughter, I don't think she's able to see what she needs or articulate what she needs until she is off drugs. I'd like to really push for institutionalized care. And I know that some see that as a negative, but there are some people who would thrive in that environment, being able to having structure, to getting meals, education, clean clothes, but some direction. She needs direction, and she needs 24-hour supervisory care, and there isn't anything like that. If she can walk away from it, she will.
And now the province, has been trying to make legislative changes that would allow parents or guardians to compel teens into a healthcare facility, but that's faced opposition from the representative for children and youth, who says that is traumatizing. You can hear the conflict in Luana's voice, right, as she's speaking about it. Where do you personally stand? Yeah. Where do you personally stand on it?
Michelle, it is just heartbreaking, and I can imagine. And I talk to people in my community about these issues as well when there are youth who are struggling with mental health and/or substance use issues. I mean, those are the most heartbreaking situations that we see. And there are so many people who I talk to who have experience of that in their circles. And I think what is so important about how we really build out our child and youth mental health system is that we are really paying attention to youth. And I think you heard this from Daniel Fast. I know that that Daniel Fast has been on the show as well. And what we hear from what experts in child and youth mental health tell us is that that there isn't a lot of positive evidence to suggest that compelling treatment, particularly for youth, it is actually works. And the concern is that the youth who are most at risk may wind up even more distrustful of the health system, more distrustful of adults around them, which could make the situation that they're in worse. So this is the space that we need to really be working in terms of building up services for youth that they feel comfortable in, that they feel that they have trust in, where they will build relationships that will help them down the path to accept care. We have 28 beds opening at Covenant House in a few days, in fact, in downtown Vancouver, which will provide a safe space for some of the most vulnerable street entrenched youth in Vancouver. And it is services like that that are absolutely critical to our ability, the ability of healthcare workers and outreach workers to build those relationships with youth so that we can support them along a pathway for care. I agree that these issues are very, very challenging and utterly heartbreaking, and we are doing everything that we can. We're working with experts like Daniel Fast and others through Foundry. We've really expanded the Foundry network so that youth age 12 to 24 have completely barrier-free access to primary care, to mental health care, to really whatever they need in very many communities now across the province. So that is a key priority. We really need to continue to work on building out our child and youth mental health system.
You would keep it voluntary, though.
Until there's some better, until there's some evidence that says that we should be doing something different. And I think this is the other thing, Michelle, that is so important. I mean, we are going to listen to advice from all jurisdictions, because all jurisdictions across the continent are dealing with this challenge, this crisis, right? We're not the only province dealing with this. We're not the only province that has a mental health and crisis and a toxic drug crisis right across this country, all across the US. So we will listen to advice from any jurisdiction who is doing things well. I mean, we're taking a nod from our neighbors next door in Alberta and really building out our provincial virtual program to provide better access to opioid agonist therapy, because we know that it was that piece that Luana's mother said about the stability and the structure and how critical that is. I absolutely agree with her. That is really critical to provide more opportunities for people to stabilize in their life. That can help them really in a significant way on a caring pathway. And so, we know that opioid agonist therapy, they sort of replacing illicit drugs with things like methadone or Suboxone that deal with the cravings, but don't provide the sort of the euphoria. Those have proven to be very helpful tools in combating opioid use disorder, and we're going to really expand that system across the province to make it more available, particularly in rural and remote areas. Mm-hmm. Your caller from Prince Rupert, for example, we need more access in rural areas too, for sure.
Right, and those are our guests there. But so you're saying make them more available, but no evidence convincing you right now that involuntary treatment, especially for teens,
if more evidence comes forward, we are certainly going to look at it. I mean, I will say that we're in really new territory here, Michelle. We have a synthetic opioid crisis. It's not even just an opioid crisis anymore. This is not heroin. This is not what we were dealing with when we were dealing with heroin 10 years ago. These are very powerful synthetic opioids. They are doing very damaging things to people's brains and bodies, and we are looking at, this is sort of new territory that we are all in. So we're going to be looking again at everything, all of the evidence. What do we need to do? What are all the tools? I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out, frankly, because this is a serious crisis that we're in. There are very many new elements to it, and we need to develop new interventions and new innovations that we think might work.
Okay, you're being very careful there in terms of what you say about what your plans would be for this. What the families say, though, whether it's Loanne or anybody else calling in, is they describe a system where they don't have a voice. They're not included in that decision making. They say there's no support for them, whether it's navigating the system or psychological or financial, a lot of, groups to join, but nowhere official for them to turn. And we have an email from someone who wrote and said, I'm a mother of an addict. I need counseling myself, not just groups. I've participated in those groups, but I need one-on-one counseling for my grief. I've tried counseling and nothing. And we heard from another guest as well from Together We Can, Stephen Hall, who said there's just no help for families to navigate the system. What is available for families?
Yeah, I think that's a really important area because, of course, it's not just the individual who's ill; it's the sort of their whole surrounding community that's impacted. And I also hear a lot from families, and I meet with a lot of families and talk with a lot of families about the impact. And I agree that that's an area that we need to continue to do more work to integrate that kind of family care. And I know there are some organizations like Together We Can who do a good job of that. They really make it part of their program. And
They're
again,
privately
that's
run,
another.
though. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we're actually contracting with Together We Can. They're providing some services through through our new initiative, a Road to Recovery that's being developed at St. Paul's, and we have a closer relationship with many community-based providers, but they're a critical part of the continuum of care. We have, for example, in Surrey, in the Fraser Health Authority, new transition teams that have been developed and that are based in emergency departments, so that when youth come in and they're in crisis, they have a dedicated mental health, kind of peer-based mental health team that works with them and the family to help ensure that transition from the acute phase of whatever they're dealing with into the community and that connection to community care, that they have assistance, they have some navigation with that. I think that's a really important development, important program, and we're certainly looking at the outcomes of that to see how that is filling a gap, which is there when folks transition from acute into community, and looking at how we can potentially scale that up as well. So that's one example. There are other examples. We've expanded just general access to community-based counseling. We're having an engagement right now across the province about regulating psychotherapeutic counseling, which
Right.
again is good. I mean, that is pulling that part of that work that is done also sort of closer into this continuum as well, which I think is an important step.
Minister Whiteside, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
We are off the air in a few seconds, but we do have some breaking news to bring you. Serial killer Robert Pickton has died. Correctional Service Canada states Pickton has died following an attack involving another inmate on May 19th. Stay with CBC News for more of this story. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care.